Hi guys. So in this video, we will be discussing about some important annotations which I asked in interviews and which are very much important for project perspectives. Okay. There are few annotations which are not used at all, but there are some annotations which are mostly used, and the interviewer will focus upon those kind of annotation based questions in interview. So let's understand and see like what all interview questions can be based upon the annotations. We will be categorizing it into multiple factors, and then on each aspect I will be seeing like in this type of annotations what all annotations are there, this particular type of feature what all annotations will be used. So everything step by step will be breaking it down for you. Okay, so let's get started. I hope you can see my screen now. So here we will be exploring some important Java annotations based questions and their applications. Okay, so let's understand it step by step. Yeah, so these are the things that we'll be discussing. Okay, so first will be introduction to Java annotations, then core annotations in Java, Spring Boot annotations, overview, dependency injections, what all kind of annotations are used for dependency injection. Okay, web and HTTP annotations, security annotations in Spring Boot, data access annotations, testing based annotations, and finally conclusion. So these all things basically we will be discussing in this video. So let's get started with the first thing, which is like introduction to Java annotations. Okay, so let's understand like what are Java annotations. So annotations, why we are using it is like to reduce the boilerplate code, right? So whatever annotations you are making use of, it is internally a class or an interface only. Okay, so whatever class it is built up, we are just annotating it and we are making use of it. Okay, so that we don't have to go ahead and implement those classes, because it is very much time consuming. So what all annotations you are making use of, like at the controller, at the rate service, at the rate repository, if you go inside, these all are what? These all are some kind of interfaces which has some abstract methods or default methods present within it, and we are utilizing it in our classes. So these are the basic annotations overview which you should understand. Okay, so annotations are nothing but a class or an interface which we are making use of in our current project, so that it reduces the boilerplate code. You should not repeat the same code again and again in every project you are building. Okay, so these are the metadata that provide data about a program, but it is not a part of the program itself. Okay, and they serve various purposes, such as it provides information for the compiler, runtime processing, and it helps in code analysis as well. Okay, and it reduces boilerplate code, and hence it enhances the readability of the code. So this is a basic overview of Java annotations. Okay, so these are some of the core annotations in Java. So that was the like second topic to understand, like what are core annotations in Java. So first is override. So you might have implemented some interface. Okay, so that interface might be having some methods present within it, like some abstract methods. Okay, so when a class implement that interface, so we have to override those methods. It is not with abstract class, but with interface we have to override those abstract method to the class which is implementing that interface. Okay, so override annotations will be on top of those inherited methods. Okay, so this is the basic description of override. So use cases like it helps to ensure that a method signature matches the superclass method. Okay, and this is the particular syntax of writing it. Like override, we have to write over a method, okay, within a class, and then you can have my method. Okay, it can be any method. Then there is added deprecated annotation is there. So as soon as you move ahead in the versions of Java, like first you are using Spring Boot 2.x, okay, then it slowly upgrades to Spring Boot 3.x, then it will be moving to Spring Boot 4.x. So new things will be implemented. So new classes will become an annotation basically. Okay, so there is a chance that current annotation might get deprecated. Okay, so whatever classes are not being used as of now, which has been deprecated, there must be some advanced feature class which has been created on top of it. So if you are making use of older classes, that still will be there, you can make use of it, but it will be shown as a slash on that particular line. Okay, so whenever you are importing that class, you will be seeing like there is a strike through over that class name. Okay, so that means that that particular class is being deprecated. Okay, we cannot use that class. So if you are making use of deprecated over on top of that method, then what will happen? Because of which it will allow those warnings to get removed from your project. Okay, you will not be seeing those project warnings because you are adding this deprecated on top of that method. So you can still make use of that particular class. Okay, so the deprecated, basically it marks a method or class as outdated. Okay, and it suggests that it should not be used. There must be some advanced level classes that are present, so you can make use of that in your particular project, in your particular class, but don't use deprecated classes. Okay, so this is the way that you can come ahead with. Then at that suppress warning, so there must be some warnings are there that is coming again and again, but it is important for your project. Okay, so you cannot remove that. So what you can do, that warnings will still be coming, so you can add at the rate suppress warning over a method. So if you do that, then whatever kind of warnings are coming in your project as of now, it will get removed. Okay, and it will not show warning again. So it can be like some unchecked exception warning, or any kind of checked exception, unchecked warning will be there. So those will be shown in the form of yellow sign. Okay, yellow sign will be there. So it will be removed with at the rate suppress warning. Okay, and at the deprecated means it will be deprecated. It will show you that this class cannot be used as of now, and there is some advanced feature classes that has been created on top of it. Use that. Okay, if you are still using, it will show at the rate deprecated. Okay, it will show that this particular class has been deprecated with strike through. Okay, on that class. I hope you got the basic knowledge of code annotations in Java. Okay. Then there's Spring Boot annotations overview. Like the entire set of annotations has been divided into multiple aspects. So what all kind of divisions are being provided, that I will be going to tell you. So first is like basic Spring Boot annotations. Okay. So there are multiple annotations which are basic to Spring Boot, like at the rate configuration, at the rate component scan, at the rate Spring Boot application. These are basic to Spring Boot. Okay. Where without which the Spring Boot will not start. Then comes the core annotations, in which like added configuration, Spring Boot applications, okay, added deprecated, added override, these all things will be coming under core annotation. Then component management based annotations, it will have like added component, added service, okay, and there are multiple stereotype annotations which are aliases of component, right? Just like added controller, service, repository, these are can also be used as an alias for added component. So those are also coming under component management annotations. Okay, then dependency injection annotations will be there, like added auto wired, qualifier, these all are coming under dependency injection. Okay, so yeah, so these are multiple subcategories of annotations, so that we can understand like at a broad overview level what all kind of annotations can come. Okay, and if you are seeing like REST API perspective, there also there are multiple aspects, like the getter method you are using. Instead of getter method, you can have at the get mapping. Then there is path variable, request param, query param, okay, request body annotations. These are various kind of annotations which are used in Spring Boot. Okay, so we have to understand all those aspects. So you might be understanding about auto-wired annotation. So basically you are injecting a bean. A bean is nothing but a class or an object which has been created. So instead of creating the object of that class into your current class, rather than that, let Spring create that object for you. Okay, let Spring inject that dependency for you so that you don't need to create that by yourself. Okay, so that is the importance of auto-wired. So auto-wired can be by type, can be by name, can be by ID. Okay, so there can be multiple ways to inject your auto-wired bean. Okay, it can be injected via field level. It can be injected through constructor also. Okay, there are multiple ways. You can go through that as well. Okay, so it simplifies the process of dependency injection for auto-wired. For qualifier, we have to qualify, like if there are multiple classes implementing the interface, we need to know like which particular class should be given the more priority as compared to other class. Okay, so for that qualifier is used, because there are multiple beans, right? If there are multiple beans, which one need to qualify? We have to provide that information as well. Otherwise, compiler will get confused at runtime, like which particular bean will be given the priority. There are multiple beans injecting that, but implementing that particular interface. So to remove that doubt, we have to make use of qualifier. Okay. Then primary annotation, it marks the bean as primary candidate for injection. Okay, when there are multiple beans of same type will be present. So it is similar to qualifier, but in added qualifier, you have to provide the information about a class with double quotes, like which particular class you need to qualify. Okay, with respect to lot of beans. But if you are writing added primary over the bean, okay, so what will happen if you are putting added primary over a class, then that particular class will be marked as a primary candidate to get injected into another class. Okay, when there are multiple beans available. So in that scenario, we don't have to provide a class name for that. Okay, it will automatically be understood like this particular class will be injected as a first primary candidate. Okay, so this is the way we have to understand. So it helps in resolving the conflict by designating a default bean to be used when there are no specific qualifier is provided. Okay, so when there is no qualifier being provided, then you can make use of primary annotation to provide the default bean configuration. Okay, then value, it is used to inject a value from the application.properties or application.yaml file. Okay, so there are like key value pairs will be there, right, in a properties file. So whenever we are making use of those aspects into your particular class, then what will happen? You can't directly make use of it, right? So they just way to do that, like dollar sign, then curly braces, then we have to pass the key there, and then we have to define some variable like private string the variable. Okay, and then you can have value on top of it, like value, then you provide the curly braces and then provide the key of that properties file. Then while running it, it will fetch the value based on that particular key. So to resolve those properties file value, we have to make use of value annotation. So these are important dependency injection annotations which are most widely used and which are most frequently asked in interview as well. Okay, specifically the difference between qualifier and an primary, qualifier versus auto wired. So these type of questions you should be prepared. Okay, so there are certain web and HTTP annotations also that we have to go through. Okay, so overview of web annotations, like these are very much essential for handling any HTTP request. Okay, there are multiple HTTP requests and response are available in Spring Boot. Okay, so whenever you are writing any RESTful web services, in that scenario you have to write a request and response. Okay, we have to handle those requests. Like if there is some exceptions are coming, then how are you handling those requests? Whenever client wants to send some data in a backend side, so how will you take that data? So that data is of different categorization, right? So one categorization will be with respect to post mapping, like you want to save certain data into database, so that will be post mapping. So for post mapping, what all configurations you are doing in the controller side? Okay, and are you defining any API gateway or not to enhance the security? Okay, so these all things will be coming under HTTP annotations. Okay, so whenever you are handling any HTTP request to give response to some kind of error, there's some error codes also that you can throw. So to do all those request responses, there are multiple annotations we are making use of for handling this HTTP request response cycle. So first and foremost is request mapping. Okay, so at the top of the controller, first you have to write @controller. Okay, if you don't need response body, if you need response body, and if you don't want to write it separately, go ahead and write it over a method. Or else, if you don't want to write it again and again, then you can write like @rest controller on top of the class. Okay, if you are writing @rest controller, then you don't have to write @response body. Okay, I hope you got a clarity on this. Then what we have to do in this, then there is request mapping. So whenever there is like get mapping, post mapping, put mapping, so everything can be handled with request mapping. So you are writing like request mapping, and then within that you can have like value equal to HTTP methods dot get dot post dot put. This is one of the way. And there is some other ways also. You can write like with @get mapping, @post mapping. Directly you can write. Don't write @request mapping again and again. Okay, so that is the most used feature that we are using. Okay, we are not writing request mapping in our project. We are directly writing what kind of annotations you want to use for post, get, and put and delete mappings. Okay, I hope you got the clarity on this. For update and delete, there is put mapping and delete mapping. Okay, so here question can be asked like, what's the difference between put and patch? Put versus patch. Okay, so with the help of patch, basically you are updating certain columns in DB. Okay, but with put mapping, you are just modifying all the columns. You are updating all the columns of that table. Okay, so this is the difference between put and patch. So these kind of questions can also be asked in interviews. Okay, so you should be prepared on this basically. So some security annotations are also there that needs to be learned. Okay, so like enable web security, it activates the security feature in your Spring Boot application. Okay, and this must be used in your configuration class to configure your web application. Okay, so whenever you are writing it over a class or on a configuration class enable web security, then what will happen? That particular class will be made as a configuration class for enabling the security for web applications. Okay, And then you can it is like being used in Spring Boot 2.0. Spring Boot 3.0 is making use of like security filter chain, so that is more advanced version you can make use of. But enable web security is important whenever you need to implement Spring security. Okay, and under it secured, it restricts the access to methods which are based upon certain rules authorities. Okay, so some roles you can apply, like some admin role is there, user role is there, or certain other kind of roles you can mark that particular feature. Okay, so to mark that, you have to provide like this particular feature is to be given only to admin. Okay, so some functions will be there, like let's suppose you want to see some management level data you want to see. So we have to check first if that particular user is authenticated to see those records or not. So how will you give that access? You can give that access via role based authentication via @secured annotation. So if you are providing that access with @secured admin role, then after that you are writing some method calling or anything you are writing, then it will give access if the user is authenticated to see that. Okay, so that is also very much important. Then added pre-authorize. Okay, so it provides the access control using expressions with Spring expression control language. Okay, so there is a Spring expression language with the help of which if you are writing like added pre-authorize, it will authorize basically if that particular user is having this role or not, what particular role that user is having. Okay, so this can be written with the help of this syntax, like pre-authorize, we are writing has role user. Okay, so if the role is user and user ID is authentication.principal.id. Okay, so in this it restricts the access based upon the user roles. So if the user role is present and the authentication principal ID is present, then only this particular access will be given to that particular user. So there is a pre-authorization part is there. Based upon this, it will allow the user to go ahead and use that particular functionality. Okay, so it will pre-authorize it. Okay, so there are multiple things you have to make use of. Then roles allowed, what all roles are allowed for that particular user? So let's suppose some person is coming, so that person might be on the higher management level, so that person might be having access to admin roles, he might be having access to user roles as well. But those who are at a lower level, they should have only access to user roles. So how will you give those kind of permissions to that particular user? So for that, we have to make use of @roles allowed. So it restricts the access based upon the specified roles. Okay, so example you can see @roles allowed role underscore user role underscore admin. So it allows use access to users with either the user or the admin role. So maybe some person is present at a higher authority, so they need access to both user as well as admin. So for that, you can give with both the roles. You can provide user roles also, you can provide the admin role also. So there are basic 4 kind of security based annotations that can be asked in interview. So you can go ahead and prepare for it. So some data access annotations are important. Okay, so this is used while you are interacting with DB. Okay, so with interaction with DB, there are multiple annotations you are making use of, right? First is added repository for repository layer. Okay, so there can be multiple annotations like added native query you can make use of. Okay, then named query you can make use of. Those things is at the repository side. Then entity layer. Okay, whenever you are writing any entity class to interact with DB to map the column data with the Java fields, so for that some annotations you have to make use of. So first and foremost annotation is entity annotation for JPA. Okay, which is mapped to particular database table. So it will entity, basically it will mark that particular class name to be mapped with the table name of database. Okay, so with the help of added entity, it will mark the class as a JPA entity. Okay, then with table, so it specifies database table into which the entity is mapped. Okay, so there is certain table like employee table is there. Okay, so how will you make sure that this employee table which is present in database is mapped to this particular class, entity class? Okay, so for doing that mapping with respect to table, we can make use of table. But if the table name which is in DB is exactly the same as the entity name, then you don't need to write table. This is not mandatory, this is optional. Okay, but if you see like the employee is all in capital letter in table, but in Java class, you need to modify something in camel casing part, or need to add some extra words on top of it. If you want to modify that, then to map that, you have to make use of table so that it identifies that this particular class is only mapped with that particular DB table. I hope you got the clarity on this. So this is the example. Like entity you are writing on top of class, then table, then name, you are providing the name of the table, then you are writing the class, then getter and setter for the fields. Okay, then ID. So So added ID will be used when you have to mark that this particular field is the primary key for that table. Okay, so in the SQL or Oracle or any other DB, we can mark it with, we can create the primary key over there with the constraints. Okay, so we can create a query over there. But in field level, in the Java level, how will you determine that this particular field will be primary key? So for that, we need to have added ID over that field, which you want to mark it as a primary key. Okay, so this is an example. @ID, @generated value, strategy equal to generation type dot identity. And then you are providing the ID in the long format. Why? Because you have to generate that ID. Okay, you are not providing the ID. It is being auto-generated. So let's suppose in future you want to scale your microservice and there are like millions of IDs are coming over a period of 4 or 5 months. Then how will you generate each and every time those IDs? It's very hectic thing, right? So let JP only handle that. Let JP only generate those IDs by themselves. So for that, we have to provide generated value for that. So this is also very important annotation. Okay. Then generated value, we're already coming to that. So it specifies the strategy, like how you want to generate those IDs, okay, with the help of primary key values. So here you can see we are providing the strategy. So if you are providing identity, it will generate the identity level IDs, okay. And if you are providing auto, so it will automatically generate the ID based upon what type of ID you are providing. Okay, so later, let's suppose ID is alphanumeric, okay, so the ID will be generated accordingly. Okay, so here we are providing long ID. Long ID means ID will be of long type. Okay, so in that scenario, ID will be generated like 1011L, 101112L, like that. It will be of long type. Okay, so it will automatically get generated. Okay, so generally in our projects, we are making use of auto. We don't make use of any other type of strategies. Okay. Yeah, so at that column, it maps a field to the database column. Okay, so if you want to map that this particular column needs to be linked with this particular class field value, then you have to make use of @column. So this is the way we can write @column, name equal to email, nullable equal to false, and unique, whether this particular column will be unique or not, that also we can provide it over here. But this is totally optional. You can remove @column as well. Okay, if you know that this particular field and this particular column is same, then you can remove column as well. Okay, but it is mandatory that we should provide that. Okay, so for better access to the database columns. Okay, so we can easily see, because columns in database will be all in underscore, all capitals, underscore. If you're adding some other words, it will be like that, like some word underscore, then some word underscore, like that is the way to write in database columns. Okay, but fields are not following the same pattern. In fields in Java, we are writing with the help of camel case. Okay, we are not writing in those aspects. So it's always advisable to use @column over the field to map to particular database columns. I hope you got a understanding of it, like how to write these data access annotations. Okay. Then there are some testing annotations that you have to understand. So there are multiple kind of testing you are making use of, right? Like Cucumber testing you are making use of, like Mockito testing that you are making use of. So what will you do in that scenario? So if you are making use of Mockito, then at the top of the class you can write like @spring extension. Okay, @Mockito extension. Okay, @extends with Mockito extension dot class. These kind of things you can make use of. Okay, then over each method you are writing @test, so that it signifies to Spring Framework like this particular method is a test class method. Okay, then for integration testing you can write @spring boot test, where you can implement Cucumber for end-to-end integration testing. Okay, it allows for comprehensive testing for the entire application at once. Okay, then web layer testing, for that you need to have @web MVC test. It tests your Spring MVC controllers. Okay, and it will mock all your service layers in present within your controllers. Okay, so controller will be calling that service layer. So we are auto wiring that service layer within the controller layer, and through that we are internally connecting to service, and service is internally connecting to repositories. Okay, so all will be mocked. Okay, for this, so added web MVC test is being written over controller layer class. Okay, without the need for full application context. Okay, so this is the way we have to understand. This is for testing level basically. And there are multiple annotations as well. Okay, we are making use of before each, after each. Okay, so it is done for the setup level. So if you are writing some setups, like those particular fields will remain the same for all the methods in that particular test class, then you can do the setup for that. And if you are having some application.properties key value pairs, so that also you can add it in your setup method. Okay, with reflection. So reflection utils.set field. So like that you can make use of to set the fields with a given value. okay, in test cases. So this is one of the way to have properties file values in your test classes. Okay. And there are some important interview questions also coming on mockitos, like how will you mock static methods? How will you mock private and final methods? Okay. Can you break the private constructors? Okay. So these kind of questions can be asked, so you should be prepared with that. So at the end, we have understood a lot of things. We have understood like what are the core annotations. So the starting point of the annotation that we have understood is at the Spring Boot application. Okay. So within that added Spring Boot application, there are multiple annotations present. Okay, added component, added enable auto configuration, like added configuration, added enable auto configuration, and added component scan. So these are multiple annotations which are present within added Spring Boot application in the main class. Okay, so if it is not present, the entire flow will not get executed. So that is the first and foremost thing that we should know. Then we understood about the stereotype annotations like added controller, added service, added repository, all will be interchangeable. But added controller, these three controller service repository, these three are aliases for added component. Okay. But if you are replacing added controller with any other like added service or added repository, whenever client is sending some data, it will not be understandable by the Spring like this particular class is a controller class. If you're not using added controller, if you are making use of some other annotations like added service or added repository. Okay. So it's advisable like controller classes should be marked with added controller or rest controller. Okay. Then after that, there are multiple things that we are making use of, like added service for service within entity layer. We can have like added ID, added table, added column. Okay, then added generated value. These all things we have learned about. Then at the testing level, we have understood like added Spring. Okay, added Spring test will be there for end-to-end testing. Okay, then Mockito extension. Okay, and that extends with Mockito extension dot class. Added test we can make use of. Added spy is there. Added mock. Okay, added inject mock. What's the difference between mock and inject mock? And added mock bean is there. Okay, and added bean also is used in configuration classes if you want to configure a particular bean. Then we have learned about added qualifier, added auto wired. How will you make use of in your class? Then differences between added primary, added qualifier. Then at the HTTP level, we have learned a lot of annotations, right? Like added request mapping if you want to handle all kind of mappings. But if you want to specify, you can make use of added get mapping specifically, or post mapping, or put mapping, or patch mapping, or delete mapping depending upon your requirement. Then we learned about put versus patch. What's the difference? Okay. Yeah, so these all things will be covering entire set of annotations. And if you are going ahead in microservices, also there are certain kind of annotations for Spring Cloud. Okay, how will you enable that? Then security level annotations will be there, like added pre-authorize. Okay, added enable web security. Okay, so there are multiple annotations that we have to make use of. Okay, then learn about security filter chain in Spring Boot 3.0. Okay, so these all things if you can go through, then you will be good to go for all kind of interviews. I hope you have understood and mastered this annotation. So go ahead and learn the entire things. Like these all things are important for interview. So these all things only I wanted to tell you about. I hope you got the concepts, you got the learnings. So go ahead and implement all this. So we'll be seeing you in the next video with next set of topics. Till then, it's Devjit Roy signing off. Bye bye.